Gostaríamos de convidar para uma ação de encerramento da terceira Semana Internacional de Esporte pela Mudança Social, uma manhã de esportes aberta à população que será realizada no sábado, dia 29 de novembro, na Praça da Sé.
Starting on 29th of November on Praça da Sé, we will have street soccer, chuckyball and tennis. The action is part of the campaign of RAINS for the improvement of sports. Now we will start the second seminar of sports and human development, active leisure, long life.
Conferência Canadian Sport for Life, uma nação inspirada
we
a se
have
movimentar, que
Canadian
apresentará a
sports, a
plataforma
nation
Canadian Sport for
inspired
Life,
to move.
voltada para melhorar a
And
qualidade do esporte e da atividade
now
física no Canadá.
This is targeting the improvement of quality of physical activity in Canada. Sports, education, leisure, and health around the policies of actions and aligned at the local, community, and national level. In order to mediate, we will call Professor Paula Corsacas from the Program of Human Development through Sports from the USP's Center of Sports Practices.
E chamamos o conferencista, Sr.
And Mr. Richard Ray, President of the International Sport for Life Society. He is faculty of the Global Studies of Delaware and one of the mentors of the structuring of Canadian Sport for Life, CS4L, and long-term development. We inform that the questions can be sent to the panel. We have two people to collect the questions. You only have to raise your hand in order for them to come to you. Please put your contact email, because if any question cannot be answered now, the speaker can do it afterwards. Now, Mrs. Paula Corsacas.
Okay, I'll just talk a little bit about the bom dia a todos. Espero que todo mundo tenha descansado.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody has rested well and is ready for the second round of the seminar. While we get another headphone to Professor Richard, I want to tell you our expectation for today, especially with the presentation of Professor Richard. We have a full day of discussions about public policies and the challenges we have in thinking about a national sports system for our country, considering that the existence of the sports ministry is something very recent in our political history. A nation who receives World Cup and Olympic Games needs to really take care of the cultural equity that represents sports today. This is the expectation we somehow have that RAIMS and all the partner organizations, Ayrton Senna Institute, SESC, CPU, USP, can contribute for this reflection, not only in theoretical terms, but also what the steps are that we need to take from now on in order to be able to see this in the near future. All discussions today are around this subject, thinking about a macro perspective in terms of designing a national policy and structuring a national sports system, up to how this system and the policy get embodied and become alive in the micro scenario, which are the cities where we are able to start with these activities involving all the population. Cities as space to engender sports practices. Professor Richard, it is a privilege to have his presence here in Brazil. being able to share his experience over a decade in Canada in the reformulation of sports policy and in reformulating the whole vision and beyond the actions which target sports in Canadian population. So take advantage of every second we have with him. We have now 1.5 hours with him in his formal presentation, but he will be around for the whole day. Enjoy, ask your questions, and get involved with the movement of building an effective and democratic national sports system.
As we say in Brazil, como a gente fala no Brasil, a bola está contigo. The ball is with you.
Good morning. So thank you very much for having me in Brazil. This is my first time, and everyone that I've spoken to about coming to Brazil said Brazil is beautiful, and the people are even more beautiful. And I found that this is true. I've had a wonderful time, and so now I feel that I have to do a sensational presentation to pay back Paula and the wonderful people that I've met. So I hope I don't disappoint. So today we will speak at the macro level, and that's very interesting. As I'm not sure what happened to my words. Seriously, I think the words were there. What this puzzle is supposed to say is the thinking that has got you here will not get you there. It will not get you where you want to go. So the thinking that got you here is not the thinking that will get you to where you want to go. So, and that's really the theme of my presentation today, is that we cannot think in the way that we've been thinking. We must think in different ways. We must be innovative. We must change. So today we're going to talk at 3 different levels. We're going to talk at the macro level, the level of government and national Olympic committees. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the organizational level, so national sport governing bodies. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the level of the coach, and so the practical implementation of policy. So in Sport for Life, when we look at systems, we look at systems with 3 key outcomes. One is the development of physical literacy. And yesterday, you heard from Melanie about physical literacy and the concept of physical literacy. The concept of movement, motivation, confidence, the valuing, and taking responsibility for one's activity. So physical literacy, excellence, we'll talk about linking with excellence, as well as being active for life. The next click I'm going to do is a critical point, and that is they're all connected. And in my very limited understanding of the Brazilian system, I don't see a lot of connections. I see independent systems operating, and this is typical of most countries in the world, and this is typical of decades of system building that has happened in this sector around the world. and in fact typical of where Canada was and where we're trying to move away from. So we want to see these systems connected. So we want to see sport and recreation or leisure, education and health working together on this issue. And again, we've seen mostly independent systems in the past. All the words have come up. So we come from the philosophical view that it takes a village to raise a physically literate person. So what we have seen in many parts of the world, and certainly in Canada as well, is that for many decades we talked about quality daily physical education. And essentially everyone felt that it was the responsibility of only education and physical education to create the physically competent child. They left it to the education. In the meantime, sport felt that their only role was to prepare athletes to the next level, and that they didn't have a role in developing physically literate children. And so this is a mentality that we're working to change. So when we look at the three key outcomes and we talk about active for life, I just want to show you a problem, a big problem. So this is 1985 in the United States, and this is obesity levels, the BMI of over 30 in the states within the United States. You can see that at that time in 1985, a lot of states did not have a lot of data. You can see on the bottom the legend where you have less than 10% and 10 to 14%. Okay, so now we fast forward a little bit. This is not looking good. So now we're up to 2000, and you can see now half the United States is 20 to 24%. Now we're over 30% for a third of the United States. Not good at all. So as you can see, there's a visual trend in the United States. Now I'd love to stand here and say, well, in Canada, we're not like that. And in Brazil, we're not like that. But the statistics show that we're behind the United States, but not very far behind. And actually you can see, and it's maybe that it's not actually that there's anything much better in Canada, but in fact that as you go up in the United States to colder climates, obesity gets less. When I speak to UNESCO, they tell me that the inactivity rates of children in Latin America, Brazil is the worst. Lowest activity rates by children. So we have a problem. We have a problem in the United States. We have a problem in Canada. We have a problem in the world. So then we'll talk about excellence just a little bit when we talk about systems. And we had athlete development systems that were articulated in the 60s and 70s. and they look like this. We'll take a whole bunch of children, participate in sport at the lower levels, and we'll systematically get rid of them so that we have a few left at the higher level. It was and still is a system of exclusion. What do we do with the arrows? What do we do with the children that are the arrows? Do we take care of them? Do we care about them? Or in sport, do we only care about those who have the ability to go to the next level? So in sport, we created a system of exclusion. And I know in Canada, what that did is the people that believed in inclusion, they worked in recreation, they worked in the leisure industry, and they didn't like sport. And it's taken us, well, we're not there yet, but it's taken us years to actually, when we came with Canadian Sport for Life and said, no, we have a new way of doing things, we want to work together. The recreation and leisure were very suspect. No, you're from sport. You exclude kids. You play games like dodgeball. Does everybody know dodgeball? Right? Well, what does it do? It immediately excludes the kids that are least capable. Right? Hit them, and then they go and sit, and they've had a bad experience. So they don't like sport. And the kids in the end are the kids that are already agile and fit and love sport. They're the ones in the end. What a poor game to be played in any school setting. Absolutely opposite of what we want to achieve. And that's our sports system. It's a system of exclusion. So one of the things that we identified, I got all the words, is we have been honest to say that not all sport is good. There is poor sport. And so what we talk about more and more, we don't say sport, we say quality sport. To distinguish, well, what is quality sport? Well, it has some characteristics. Because not all sport is good. It's not a good experience for everyone. We had a speaker yesterday who's now a leader in the SESC, right? Who had a bad experience and is trying to change it. So not all sport is good, and when we start to realize that, we go, okay, well now we have to think a little bit more. We have to create change. So I've talked about Active for Life, and I've talked about excellence, and we see we have a problem. So whose problem is that? Whose problem is that? Ours. It's all of ours. Everybody together. So we must work together because this is a big challenge. You saw in the obesity rates, we're losing. We are not winning. So I know that you all are sporty people. When you're not winning, you have to change. You have to change tactics or techniques to have any chance of winning. So we have to change. We have to think differently. And this is our favorite saying of all. Because if we do the same thing, if we have the same systems, the same structures, think in the same way, and think it's going to change, we're insane. So we must think differently. So with Canadian Sport for Life, we tried to think differently. So you can see this is to replace the pyramid, that system of exclusion, where at the active start, we want 100% of kids to be active. But then they all go on a journey, and that journey absolutely has different levels of capability. Some levels of capability go off to the left up to train to win, and maybe they'll stand on the podium in Rio. Others will love to compete but don't have the capability, but they're competitive for life. Others will hopefully be fit for life and be active. So everyone's journey is valued in this rectangle or Canadian Sport for Life approach. I have to remember to let the translators catch up because I know Portuguese has more words than English. So we also have on the right two little arrows there that should not be forgotten, and that's awareness and first contact. And we added those when we created what we called No Accidental Champions. So this was a supplement to Canadian Sport for Life, and this was for people with a disability. And we recognized that there was so many parents who were just not aware that their children could participate in modified sport. And then we also we were aware that first contact, that first interaction with children with a disability with sport needed to be very good, needed to have adapted equipment so that they had a great experience. So the way that we view sport is that sport is it's like what do you call this kind of bicycle? Okay, so riding together is excellence and active for life, and it's powered by physical literate people. So physical literacy underscores excellence and active for life, but they ride together. Okay. So the now what I'm going to talk about is the macro level and government and national sport policy and sport for life frameworks. What we've seen in the last just over a decade, so about 12, 13 years, is the evolution of sport policy and structured on the concepts that I'm talking about today. So in Ireland, the first one was building pathways in Irish sport, and so it's very similar to Canadian Sport for Life in articulating a stage-by-stage approach, as you can see in the visual on the cover. Yesterday, Melanie talked about Sport Matters. Again, a sport policy and implementation paper to change Northern Irish sport. In the United Kingdom, there was also a framework for sport in England, as well as a player improvement in Scotland. Scotland always has to be different than England. In other parts of the world, Bahrain created Bahrain Sport for Life, and as you can see by the visual, that it's completely based on Canadian Sport for Life. This is version 2 of Canadian Sport for Life here. Now, more recently, just very recently, the Aspire Academy in Qatar has created their version of the long-term athlete development model. In South Africa, they also created South African Sport for Life, and when we worked with South Africa, it was unique in that as they created the long-term athlete development, or in their case, long-term player development, LTPD, long-term player development, they also created long-term coach development. So they did the two at the same time, which is a newer innovation amongst long-term planning. In Guatemala, they've looked at taking sport for life and combining it with the Olympic values to create transforming lives. Now, what each country, when they engage in this process, they're engaging in this process to take on what they see as a big challenge. So in many cases, it's organizing their sports system and evolving their sports system. In Guatemala, their big challenge is actually it's drug cartels and gangs, and what they're trying to have sport do is to develop values in their children so that they will make the decision not to join gangs and will contribute to society. So their purpose around sport is a very high purpose. It's I don't want to prioritize these, but it's beyond even just being active. It's very much about values in their Guatemalan approach. Then when we talk about the United States is very unique because it has virtually no government funding. So there isn't kind of a higher authority of government investing in the system to organize the system. So it's a very distributed approach. But there is an institute, the Aspen Institute, that is trying to reimagine sport in the United States, and it's using Canadian Sport for Life as a model, along with physical literacy. In one of the states we've worked with is Utah and the legacy organization from the Salt Lake Olympics to create Utah Sport for Life. Now is Renato here from Design to Move? Did he make it back today? Oh, okay, that's too bad. Because Design to Move with Nike in the United States has done some great messaging. If you go on to their Design to Move website, they've done some great messaging, and within their messaging, they talk about the critical window, and this is very, I think, very good information. In the first, their first comment is the development of fundamental movement skills is the foundation of physical activity. What we're finding is that it's more powerful to say the development of physical literacy is the foundation of physical activity. And the early research returns that we're doing is proving this to be correct. And so this is one change in thinking that that we're recognizing, that we should actually stop thinking about, that we should stop thinking about physical activity and start thinking about physical literacy, because physical activity is the result, is the outcome of being physically literate or not physically literate. Physically, Melanie, can I use physically illiterate, or will I get in trouble? I can use it. Okay. So activity. If we go to the root of things, now there was a fellow yesterday who mentioned spaces. absolutely. Spaces is also a key indicator. So if we have spaces and we develop physical literacy, physical activity will follow. But we've seen in countries around the world, and certainly in Canada, where we have bombarded the public with you've got to be active, you've got to be active, get active, you've got to be active. And you see the obesity rates, you see the inactivity rates. It's not the answer. To just say you got to be active is not the answer. We believe, and we're seeing that it's to ensure that children become physically literate. That will make the difference, and then create the spaces that they can move when they are motivated and confident to move. So then we come to Canada. So in Canada in 2002, we created Canadian Sport Policy. Born from the Canadian Sport Policy, and a tool to implement the Canadian Sport Policy was the national framework that really guided national sport organizations around creating their pathways, but it also created a framework for implementation. Now, in Canada, just to give you a little understanding of Canada, not unlike Brazil, we have provinces and territories. I think you call them states, and I think Brazil, you have 27 states, if we include the capital district. In Canada, we have 13. And what is somewhat unique about Canada is that in Canada, those 13 states, they control education and health. So there's 13 different curriculums, there's 13 different departments of education, 13 different departments of health. So it's very decentralized federalism. So when I'm asked, is physical literacy, as an example, is physical literacy part of the education curriculum? I have 13 different answers. So when we talk about taking this national framework and putting it into the state level, and the state level has a lot of investment in sport as well as health and education. We look at British Columbia. British Columbia, the Ministry of Sport essentially is called Via Sport, and they just put out a strategic plan, and as you can see within the strategic plan, that Sport for Life is embodied into the state plan. So then, not unlike Brazil, we also have, well, we don't have really big cities like you have in Brazil. I think our biggest city is 4 million. And Vancouver is a big city to us. It's 2 million. So we're a lot smaller. So now we'd like to see sport strategies within cities. What we've seen in Canada is recreation or leisure master plans in cities that typically focus on spaces, on facilities. Not sure what happened there. I think it's the internet keeps, the Wi-Fi keeps wanting to connect. So my apologies. So now we're trying to move cities beyond just creating master plans for facilities, but to actually talk about sport strategies and talk about the sport and leisure activities that are going on within the facilities. And again, is it quality sport? And what our experience is that cities are say, well, no, we just rent the facility to the sport practitioner who shows up. We don't know if it's quality or not. And so this is a shift in thinking, again, trying to change the way we do things that we're engaged in this process right now. So this is the Vancouver Sports Strategy. And again, you can see those three elements, the three key outcomes are identified within their 6 goals. So, again, in your geography lesson of Canada, we have Canada, where there's a Canadian sport policy. To then have that Canadian sport policy come to life, there's the Canadian Sport for Life framework. Within the jurisdiction of British Columbia, there is the state strategic plan for sport, and then within its largest city, there's a sports strategy. So it's again aligning the system. So in the context of what you're doing, what's your big sport challenge? What is your challenge that you need to address to cause change in, and can the presentation, this section of the presentation, inform you and help you to cause change? So now we'll step down a level to the organizational level and talk about sport long-term athlete development pathways. In some countries, they're called long-term participant development pathways. It's really all the same, depending on your country. So I'm not going to go in depth into the details. These resources are actually all available and downloadable from CanadianSportForLife.ca from our website, or you can buy our book from Human Kinetics. Shameless promotion. So at the basis of Canadian Sport for Life, there's 10 key factors. Those 10 key factors, you can see. We're not going to go into the details of those 10 key factors this morning because we want to stay more at the macro level. But you can see that these are the factors that inform us about whether we're delivering quality sport, whether it's quality sport or physical activity. So within this model, it's also a stage-by-stage model to try and encourage people to do what's developmentally appropriate. So within the model, there's 7 stages. When we work with sports, in some cases, sport like volleyball, they said, well, 7 is not enough for us. We need 9 stages. And so they added learn to compete and learn to win, because they felt that like a volleyball player is often maturing a little bit later, so that they needed more stages. But it's fine. It's just adapting to each sport in this model. So again, I'm coming back to this rectangular model because I want to reinforce that this is different. This is a different mentality, because now, as I said earlier, we care about the arrows that are leaving that pyramid or that triangle. So using that model, we've worked with all the sports in Canada that are funded by the federal government, so 56 different sports, and built with a team of experts from that sport. We've built their athlete pathway. And again, this was a change when we went through this. This was a change in thinking because most of the organizations, they only looked at what we would call the train to train, train to compete, train to win stages, the excellence stages. This then had them move out of that kind of comfort zone to say, okay, how do we create quality programs at the early stages, and how can we ensure that those are multi-sport experiences within the context of our individual experience? And then it also opened them to say, well, we really don't do a lot for masters athletes. Again, once that arrow is gone, they don't do much, and we don't connect to our participants being active for life. So it was a change in thinking and an evolution of thought. When we talk about the rectangle, Melanie would have showed you this yesterday, which is essentially the Northern Ireland equivalent of the rectangle, the Canadian Sport for Life rectangle. So it's the same thing, just presented in a different way. Now this is not Northern Ireland. Now I'm down to Southern Ireland. I'm jumping around a little bit, but this is an example of where an individual sport organization within Ireland created Football for Life and a pathway. And you'll notice over on the circle that players are at the center of it, but this document, this plan, also considered referees and coaches and universities and administrators, and so very inclusive in terms of their conceptual thinking. The same thing has happened in the United Kingdom with multiple sport organizations developing pathways for their sports, so better articulating how they're actually developing athletes and retaining participants. Melanie asked me this morning, okay, so Richard, did you continue to change your presentation? And I said, yes, in fact I did. So late last night I got an email confirming that the United States has now formally announced that the United States Olympic Committee is going to go through the process of creating athlete development models for all their Olympic sports. Their athlete development model is based on U.S. ice hockey's development model, and U.S. ice hockey's development model is one that was created based on Canadian Sport for Life. And so, the United States, it's interesting working with the United States because, of course, we're the little brother, and so there's no way that the big brother can follow the little brother. So they won't say that they're following long-term athlete development, but they're following the U.S. athlete development model. And so now this has just come out that this is their 5-stage athlete development model, not long-term athlete development model, athlete development model. So it's kind of fun actually to watch this evolve. But now I think Brazil is big brother in South America. Is that right? So just to give you a little bit further understanding of athlete development models, this is basketball. So I put this in for Paula because she is a basketball player. So this is really important. This next click of the slide is a change in mentality, a complete change in mentality of a national sport organization in Canada anyway, and that is health of the nation. that they recognize that they have a role. When we talked about whose problem is it, it's our problem. This National Basketball Association has identified and embraced that they can contribute to this challenge. So they have health of the nation. They also have developed their game, which of course is logical. However, national sport governing bodies have actually not been born on developing, have not been established based on developing the game in the country. They've been developed on organizing competitions and taking national teams to compete internationally. That's what they're created on. And so they have not seen themselves as having a responsibility to develop the game. And so again, this is a confirmation of a change in mentality. So developing the game. And then what they've been doing for years is compete for the nation. So in that context, here is the fundamental stage in the youth, so youth recreational, leading into learn to train, and then train to train, train to compete, and then the learn and train to win. So they've plugged an extra stage in there. And then the ongoing active for life. So this is just scratching the surface a little bit into basketball's athlete development model. And in basketball, we actually worked with basketball before we worked with Sport Canada. They were an early engager, and now we're starting to see the impact of they made many changes to improve the quality of basketball training in Canada. It's now about 10 years ago, and we see their impact in the community and increasing the quality of youth recreational basketball, etc. But then we've also seen that in the NBA draft that there's dramatically more Canadians being drafted into the NBA, and in fact the last 2 years the first round draft picks have been from Canada. So it's impacting the whole ball, not just one piece of the ball. So that's a little bit about the basketball model, Paula, for you. Sorry, it's cold and wintry in Canada, and I picked up a little cold before I came to the warmth of Brazil. So, in continuing to evolve national sport organizations, we have identified shaping the ideal NSO. And I won't take you too much into detail. And in fact, this is downloadable from the Canadian Sport for Life resource section, so that you can read it if your Google Translate or your English is good. But you can see there's 4 steps, and the first step being to set up your framework, your pathway. What is that? And then when we create that framework of developing athletes, we immediately see that actually one of the biggest impediments to developing athletes well is the structure of competition. And one thing we also know is that coaches coach to the competition. So coaches coach to the competition. So if you create a competition where, as an example, goals for and against is the tiebreaker, coaches will try and score as many goals as possible. Well, so then you create a situation where you're taking on a weak opponent and you're trying to score as many goals as possible for the tiebreaker. And so then you don't have the opportunity to use your substitutes. So here's an opportunity to play against a weak opponent to be able to use your substitutes so that they can enjoy the game, they can have the experience of playing in the game, they can develop. But the structure of the competition does not allow the coach to do that. So competition, the structure of competition we have found is critical in terms of quality, long-term athlete development pathways. When we talk about step 3, that's implementing down into the system. And that's often a challenge. We find it especially a challenge in Canada because the money, basically money buys compliance. So the money in the Canadian sports system is in the community. It's in the members. It's not comparatively, it's not with national or professional teams. So therefore, we can only try and influence change and compliance. We can't buy compliance, which makes it a little bit of a challenge. Then on the step 4, not sure how well you can read that, but that's integration with the education sector, integration with the health sector, sport for development. So we would say that a more sophisticated national sport organization is considering those kinds of things. So when, for example, integration with the health sector, what would that look like? Obviously, well, if it's quality sport, it's kind of integrating with the health sector because they're being healthier. But there's other things. As an example, baseball. Baseball players have a high rate of doing chewable tobacco. Does everybody know chewable tobacco? Right? So what Baseball Canada has partnered with Spits, which are the sunflower seeds, and the Mouth Cancer Association to have a campaign to try and eliminate baseball players from chewing tobacco. So that's an example of a more sophisticated national sport organization because now they're engaging into the health of the nation in a really meaningful way, as opposed to just trying to create another great baseball player. So just a little example. So we can see that there's the Canadian rectangle. There's the rectangle as well in Northern Ireland, and then we have it's more of a square. Is there any Americans in the room? In the United States. So these models are being created, and I could have put up more, but this is just to show 3 examples of athlete development pathways that are being created. So now we'll move on to the next level, into coaches or treinadores. How's my Portuguese? Not so good. So when we talk about coaches, and we talk about coach education strategies and quality long-term athlete development curriculum, first, again, we have to identify what are the shortcomings. And maybe if I could get the translator to read out the what's on the screen, please. Okay? So there's a number of shortcomings. Other shortcomings are that we take adult sport and we superimpose it on children. We take male sport that's designed for males and we superimpose it on females. We don't design sport for females in many cases. So then if you combine those two together, we take adult male sport and we superimpose it on girls' sport. So again, are we doing that? Is that a shortcoming? Is there a way to change it to improve the quality of sport? So again, when we come to this level, what's different when we're talking about things? And you can see, first, we talk about moving from exclusion to inclusion. So in the design of any sport program, can we make it more inclusive than exclusive? Can we have no cuts? Can we redesign a program so that we're not cutting kids, that there's always a place for them to go? That kind of thinking. That we move from age to stage, so level of capability. So we group people children based on the level of capability, not necessarily restricted to age. That we talk about quality rather than quantity. And in many of our funding structures, government funding structures, we would ask the question of how many participants are there, but we don't ask the question, well, of what's the quality of that participant's experience. So to change from quantity to quality. To change from adult periodization, calendar planning, to considered junior athlete periodization. There's not been a lot of work been done in the world around periodization for junior athletes that are still in a multi-sport environment. Periodization is the planning of their athletic participation throughout the year. Again, as I've spoken already, moving from physical activity to think physical literacy, and to think in the way that Melanie presented yesterday. To move from single sport mentality to multi-sport mentality. Fortunately, in Brazil, you have the European club concept, the multi-sport club concept. In North America, we have single sport clubs. So the promotion of multi-sports is much more difficult than in a multi-sport club environment. Independent systems to aligned systems, and remember that arrow that connected excellence, active for life, and physical literacy. Are there connections between your different institutions that are talking about leisure sport versus high performance sport? And then that underlying philosophical goal that is sport is not done for sport's sake, but sport for society's betterment. So again, just to explain at the micro level, what we're talking about, how it's different. So this is a bit of a question for you. Who would play center on? Just shout out the number of the player that would play center on my junior high basketball team. Okay. What? Okay. Who would play point guard? Okay, Paula, who would play point guard?
I'm the one supposed to ask you.
Yeah. No, I get to ask you. Who would play point guard? Well, the boy with the ball.
Yeah, probably.
Right? He's got the ball. He's going to play point guard, right? So how do I win a game? How do I win a game with this team? straight to my number 21, who's underneath the basket, catch the ball, shoot. Okay? It's simple. It's simple, right? This is easy. This is what coaches in Canada and the United States have been doing for years. It's easy to win this game because I get number 42 to pass it to 21, and he stands under the basket and he scores. Okay? What's the problem with that? Well, the other players don't develop their skills because they're not touching the ball very much. Number 42, he doesn't grow any taller. So at the next level, he's not even tall enough to play point guard. And he's a good athlete, so he actually goes and plays football anyway because he was playing a couple of sports. So now my guy that has the dribbling skills is not on the team, and I've got to train number 15, who didn't get to touch the ball a lot. And where's number 21 playing at the next level? He's playing underneath the basket again, right? And as you develop through the levels, there gets to be a point where number 21 is not the tallest. And now he has to have other skills, and in fact, he has to dribble the ball. And he doesn't have those abilities. And so even though he's a tall kid who loved basketball, who played basketball, the way that he's been coached makes him not good enough to go to the next level. And that's what we do in sport, in the design of our coaching plans and our tactical plans to win the game. And so that's where we have to have a shift in mentality to develop those fundamental movement skills across all players, the tactical skills across all players, so that they have the ability to go to the next level. And so when we say what's different, that's different. So now I'm going to really challenge the translators because I'm going to put on a video, and this is a test.
Change is coming to tennis, and kids are leading the way. It's called 10 and under tennis, and it's a fun way for your kids to really learn the game. With courts and equipment modified to fit them, kids will develop faster and better and enjoy themselves along the way. So get your kids involved now. With 10 and under tennis, every child can learn to love the game.
So visually, that's quality sport, that's development. So, in summary, we have at the government level, national sport policy, sport for life frameworks that lead to system and sector alignment, and sport for development through physical literacy strategies. Then at the organizational level, we have long-term athlete development pathways that then lead to changes in organizational policy that then lead to quality sport programming and mentally appropriate competitions. Then at the coaches level, we have long-term coach development frameworks that and education strategies that then create stage-based coach training, and then a paradigm shift into developmentally appropriate athlete training and meaningful competition. So you end up with more physically literate children, and you end up with more quality athletes. And then, when we're taking on this challenge, we work with sport, as well as leisure, recreation, education, and health. Because again, going back to what I had said earlier, it takes a village to create a physically literate person. So it takes a village to create active and healthy people. It also takes a village to create a top athlete. In terms of how we do that, we do it in many different ways, and we do it in whatever is needed. Again, we're informed by the community in terms of their whether they're ready, able, or willing. So the community informs us whether that community is is a village, or whether the community is a sport community like a national sport organization. So it's the community that informs us and identifies, are they at the, is that community at the awareness stage? Do they need education, training, resources, engagement? Are they ready to do policy and strategy? Do they need some research? Do they need some research to be able to be the foundation for change? Each of them, each situation is different and needs to be understood to be able to cause change. So, again, what's different is at the government, National Olympic Committee, it's working together. Physical literacy, excellence, Active for Life is working together and not in separate structured institutions. At the organizational level, that there is an inclusive pathway in their design. At the coach level, that it is focusing on the proper process. Let's get number 21 to learn the ability to dribble the ball, as opposed to the outcome. So always focusing on the process of implementation of the 10 key factors in a developmentally appropriate way, as opposed to the outcome. So that's a summation of what's different. And why do we want to be different? Why do we want to innovate? Because we don't want to be insane. So we must learn from Albert Einstein that we don't want to be insane. So thank you very much, and I would invite you all to come to Vancouver in the more shameless promotion in the summer, this coming summer. And I know that there is a love for football, and I'm sure that there's a growing love for women's football in Brazil, and so it is timed at the same time as the Women's World Cup. So, thank you very much.
Bom, né? Eu sou suspeita porque eu tenho acompanhado o Rich. Oh.
Great, huh? She said, it was great, huh? I'm suspicious because I have followed Richard since Sunday. Those days have been very interesting, and personally and professionally for being able to share the day-to-day with Richard, but I had not seen the presentation. It is impressive to see the transformational capacity that they have generated in Canada. If you let me here, I will ask questions. Well, you can bring your own questions here to the front. You are designed to move, so this will allow us to move.
Vamos lá. Eduardo Uli
do
SESC,
from SESC.
He's asking
what strategies there were to get the sports federations involved in this whole system, if there was any law created or any strategy, considering the autonomy that the sports federations have in Canada.
The first strategy was a good idea. So what Sport Canada did is build a team of experts. And so this team of experts were led by Istvan Bali, who had an international reputation. And so that team of experts was offered to the national sport organizations to say, this team at no cost, this team can help you think in a new way. Some sports said, thank you, but we're fine. Other sports said, this is a great opportunity. And as I said, with some sports like basketball and diving, some other sports, we had already been working with them, and they had been contracting us before Sport Canada provided us with them. So we had the example of how we could impact in a positive way these national organizations. But then as time went on, Sport Canada said the work that is being done by this group is so important that we're going to modify the way that we fund these organizations, and we're going to ask them questions that really they could only answer if they worked with us. So now these organizations that said, well, thank you, but no thank you, started to see, oh, we need to work with these guys, and then when they engaged with us, their mentality changed. And then things have continued to evolve where now for sports to get funding in Canada, they need to have a long-term athlete development pathway that is completed. So at the beginning, it wasn't about power. It was about a good idea. But now the money the money buys compliance. Now.
Ainda sobre a questão das federações.
Still about the federations and the implementation of this whole structure. In some modalities which
A pergunta é da Mariana.
This is Mariana's question from the University of São Paulo. So, continuing, considering the sports which have what you call early specialization as a feature, there is a trend of accelerating the formation process in order to show results as soon as possible, like in artistic gym. So the question is, how were the negotiations
de desenvolvimento esportivo, de formação de atletas, especialmente nos
for the athletes with artistic gymnastics, so that the 3 first stages are followed as they were theoretically conceived?
I think I understand. So, if I'm answering it wrong, then just. So, the Canadian Sport for Life and the rectangle that I showed you is a framework, and then when we worked with the individual experts, we first asked them to become a student of their sport. So in asking them to really become a student of their sport, we then started to look at international normative data, and we then managed to determine, okay, so when do athletes in that sport first achieve international success? So for early specialization sports like artistic gymnastics, we identified, okay, if success is achieved at this age, then the stages must all be achieved by that age. So the framework was then, there was still the stages of development, but the stages of development for early specialization sports were compressed, and basically the training volume and intensity at an early age was identified as needed to be much higher, so that modification and adaptation to early specialization sports occurred through that process. Did that answer the question? One thing that we did learn in the process is that more sports thought that they were early specialization sports than there actually were. So it really is the highly acrobatic sports, and the less equipment that a sport would have, the earlier specialization would occur in that acrobatic sport. So as an example, freestyle skiing is an acrobatic sport which has a little bit of early specialization, but because the athlete has equipment attached to them, it's not as early as artistic gymnastics, as an example, or diving. Mm-hmm. So the second part of the question is very difficult. The national organizations then adopt a framework, and again, because they don't control the club, the compliance in the clubs and in the states across Canada varies, and some would comply, and others may not comply so well. And in some cases, there is an ability to influence change, and in other cases, you can't influence change. So there isn't, the Canadian sports system is not structured in a way that you can have complete authority right to the children. So the compliance, it varies. However, a national sport organization does control the curriculum within the, in Canada, we have a national coaching education plan, program, and the national organization controls the curriculum within that program. So they control the modification of the messaging to the coaches as they train the coaches.
Pergunta do Eduardo, da Fundação Gol de Letra. Ele comenta da dificuldade
Eduardo's question, he comments about the difficulty of divulging new sports modalities due to a very strong culture of soccer here in the country. He wants to know your opinion, your opinion about kimball and korfball.
De alguma maneira o sistema tem colaborado na difusão e na democratização de outros
if the system has collaborated in the diffusion of other sports which are not the commonly practiced in Canada.
In most countries of the world, there is one dominant sport within that country. In Canada, it's ice hockey. In most countries in the world, it's like Brazil, it's football. So this is a challenge of every country, but the one thing is that people are, the reason we have a large number of sports is that there's a large number of different desires by people. So, Paula likes basketball. My sport was luge because I love the speed and I couldn't afford an F1 car. So, So we know people like different sports when they're exposed to those sports. But if you're never exposed to those sports, you can never learn to like kinball or other sports. So, but as you saw when I said what's different, to move from single sport to multi-sport experiences of kids, in this framework, children should have more exposure to different sports and therefore have the opportunity to then fall in love with different sports. And also, when, you know, in Brazil, when they play football and maybe see that they have not the ability to go to the next level, because they've experienced many sports as children, they then can transfer to those other sports to continue maybe even on a pathway to excellence, but certainly on a pathway to active for life.
Eu vou reunir aqui duas perguntas numa só.
Now two questions in one. I help you if you get lost in them. First question from Ricardo,
Instituto Joaquim Cruz.
from the Institute Joaquim Cruz.
What
Was the birth process of this whole structure, this whole plan? What was the pilot project to reach the current policy scale? What was the departure point? Are there consistent results of the implementation process of Sport for Life? What are the effective impacts which that these proposals have generated around the world?
Essa pergunta, desculpa, é do Luiz.
Então, ao nascimento e o impacto,
Luiz
né?
Gustavo, do Sesc
Question from Luiz Gustavo, Sesc Piracicaba.
So the birth of this framework was in British Columbia, where Istvan Bali and I worked. We worked with the state sport teams, and Istvan comes from the eastern countries. He's Hungarian. A Hungarian sports system is a very very efficient, very effective sports system for many years. And he, in working in British Columbia, because I'm a simple man, I kept asking him to write down what he kept saying to me, half in English, half in Hungarian. And then when he wrote it down and we worked together, we evolved a model of development for athletes, and what we saw. And what we saw, and what he especially saw, because he was working with many national teams, is that national team athletes had fundamental movement deficiencies. And so we conceptualized a model to try and improve the movement skills, the sport skills, at an earlier stage of development. And so really that was the birth in British Columbia. We were doing it in British Columbia, and then the Irish found us, and then we did the Irish Pathways, and the central government in Canada, because we're in BC, so we're kind of the crazy left coast. And so the central government saw the work done in Ireland, and they liked the work done in Ireland and found it was actually done by Canadians. So that was the birth. As far as the impact, that's much more difficult to answer, because we feel from a big system perspective that it's taken 10 years to get to the start line. However, if we look at British Columbia, British Columbia is 13% of the population in Canada, but we won 40% of the, we have 40% of the Olympic team comes from British Columbia, and we won 50% of the medals. And I think the number of medals that we win in Canada in the summer games is about the same as the number of medals Brazil wins. So if you can imagine this small province, 4 million people, wins 50% of the medals that Brazil wins. So so that's an example of a macro impact. And then organizationally, we see changes, different changes, like the example that I gave in basketball, where we see the early adopters, early implementers are now having an impact on their junior national athletes, because this takes a long time. And does that answer?
Yeah. Okay. Max, do Instituto Compartilhar, fez a pergunta em inglês.
Max, from the Institute Compartilhar.
Vocês, não adianta. Você acha que a gente estava aqui na sala, conversando, tomando café.
I thought you were here in the living room chatting only. We must give us examples of the Canadian policy in the development, in the architecture of intelligent smart cities to improve the population's health. Transportation, which uses energy produced by people, by bicycles and so on, sports installations and stuff like that.
To answer that question, we would need another 2-hour presentation. Probably the best example I would say to look at is Vancouver. Vancouver sports strategy, the Vancouver active transportation strategy, where they're modifying the city to make it much more friendly to public transportation and active transportation. In all honesty, in Canada, we're learning from Europe around active transportation, because the mentality of North Americans has been very much to use the car. Another city to look at would be to Google the Winnipeg sport policy, which would be another example of a strong big city sport policy. So those would be I would say the two most sophisticated big city sport policies that exist in Canada.
In your presentation, and Melanie also made a comment about this yesterday, the school education. There we place all expectations to promote physical literacy of people. And then there is a question, what is the role of physical education inside this model, this Canadian model? Is it the school, is it one of the responsible institutions to develop physical literacy in each state? And especially the curriculum, the physical education curriculum, does every state develop their own? We have that is a question from Amanda.
Okay, thank you. So if I don't answer everything, remind me. Okay. So education is a key piece of the puzzle in terms of developing physically literate children. As I mentioned, in Canada, there's 13 different education curriculums. Many of those are, and essentially as they are reformed, they include physical literacy as a evolution of thinking around how they can contribute to a child's well-being. Unfortunately, in Canada, in those 13 jurisdictions, only only 2 require trained physical education teachers. The other 11, physical education has been demeaned, lowered to the generalist delivering physical education. So what we believe will be impactful is to actually measure or chart physical literacy for each child, so that that charting can inform the generalist teachers on how the development of each individual's physical literacy is evolving. Because this is something that teachers are used to. They chart the development of children's reading and writing. They chart their numeracy, their math skills. So now we're giving them the ability to chart the development of physical literacy, because this is natural for teachers. And without that ability to chart physical education or physical literacy in a developmental pathway, we would see that the result is that physical education is low on the agenda. So we have a set of assessment tools that we are now. These are now being used in Canada. These are only 1 year old, so it's just the start. And they are to be used in a combination to make sure that all the aspects of physical literacy are considered within the assessment and charting of a child. They give information about for the child to see their progress. It also starts to give an idea of the program of the group, to say, well, this group of Brazilian children all have very good lower body object control. However, their upper body object control is not good, so we need to change the curriculum to do more games with upper body object control, so that we can develop the whole child's range of abilities and their confidence and motivation to do activities with upper body object control. So in the school setting, they've created an adaptation of this that's also targeted at physical education teachers. These are available. Again, we give everything away in Canada, so this is available on physicalliteracy.ca. And if you want to learn more about the physical education, if you Google PHE Canada, you'll see more information, and there's a tool, a resource there called Passport for Life. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Trazendo aqui a questão da inclusão, que acho que essa é dos
In terms of inclusion is one of the big differentials of this whole view of Canadian sports. I will gather 3 questions, and I can repeat them afterwards. The first one made by Paolo from Rome, a university in Rome, and he asks, what does inclusion mean in your opinion? What are the actions made proceed with this objective that is inclusion. And Renata from SESI adds up to the question, especially in terms of gender. Are there any concerns, initiatives, or strategies focusing especially women? Because women practice less sports than men. Are there any strategies for developing sports for women? And then Luciana for Fight for Peace. She asks, is there any strategy to involve children and young men, young women in every stage of the LTD? When one organization welcomes physically illiterate children, what happens? How can you work not to exclude them from the process? Oh, 3 questions.
So the first is what do we mean by inclusion?
Yes, as a concept.
Okay. Well, what we mean by inclusion is the opportunity for everyone, to become physically literate, seek their pathway to excellence, as well as be active for life. So that's everyone. So a quick story. When I was doing the sports strategy with the city of Vancouver, we talked about physical literacy, and the suggestion by the group was that the goal should be that 80% of the children in Vancouver are physically literate, because we presume that maybe it was around 50%. So it was a big goal, 80%. So my question to them was, so what's the 20% that are the most difficult to include? Because then we can eliminate them right away to try and make it to 80%. They looked at me like, what a bad person. But of course, in asking that question, my strategy was for them to change their mentality to say it's physical literacy for all, 100%. And then we must find solutions for inclusion of everyone. And as you would have seen in the presentation, that is the goal, physical literacy for everyone. So then within the larger framework, we must start to look at, well, how do we include everyone? How do we include people with different abilities? So again, I could speak for a long time on this one subject. As I showed you, we created a supplement around athletes with a disability. We're working with the Canadian Paralympic Committee around modifying these for athletes with a disability. This is easily modified for athletes with a disability because the scale is the 100% on the scale is the 100% to one's ability. So thus it's automatically modified if you have a disability. So we work with the Canadian Paralympic Committee around physical disabilities. We've worked with Special Olympics to take the framework and apply it in the context of athletes with intellectual disabilities. So they are the experts around intellectual disabilities, we work together to find solutions for inclusion and resources that apply in that context. Sorry. In Canada, women are very strong. And so there's a very strong organization called Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport. So we've worked with that organization in terms of identifying specific issues for girls and women in sport and how there's adaptation needed to be even more inclusive to women. In the actual foundation of the design of the model, we identified that the timing of the pathway for females and males is different and unique. Therefore, it's foundational within the framework that there is a uniqueness. Again, if you go to our resource section on CanadianSportForLife.ca, you'll see the resources that we've developed with the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport. We've also worked with the Canadian Association for blind participants, for deaf participants, again because of the uniqueness of the challenges that those participants have. Then further on inclusion, we also see within our Aboriginal population that there's higher rates of obesity than the general population. There's higher rates of suicide. There's a lower number of participants that actually become representative athletes than the percentage of population. So we are right now in the middle of working with Aboriginal leaders to identify additional resources and adaptation to be culturally sensitive to the Aboriginal population, to allow them, again, to develop physical literacy, follow an excellence pathway, and be active for life.
Vamos caminhar então para o último bloco de perguntas.
And now we are going to the last block of questions. If you have any further questions, please deliver to me. We can also talk during the break. We are going to discuss values and culture issues involved in this whole process of transformation. The first question is about, comes from Daniel Polo. His question is, what are the necessary care to consider cultural and historical differences inside a country, putting that into the elaboration of a national program of physical literacy?
Again, I have to give you more information about Canada, your lesson about Canada. In Canada, as I said, we have 13 provinces and territories, so states. One of those, Quebec, speaks French as a primary language. Another one is completely bilingual. The other 8 provinces speak English, and the French and the English are culturally unique. And in the territories, there is the Inuit. You might call an old term is Eskimos. And they speak Inuktitut. So as we've developed this model, we've always included people from the variety of cultures within Canada to ensure that we're culturally sensitive in terms of the design of our model and information. And then those people are also champions back into that culturally unique section of Canada. So if you'd like to learn a little bit about Inuktitut, you can go on physicalliteracy.ca, and at the bottom right-hand corner, you can click on Inuktitut, and you can learn how physical literacy is applied in a setting of Inuits in northern Canada.
Obrigada. Uma outra pergunta em relação a essa mudança de paradigma.
Another question about this change of paradigm. When we look at sports, can we measure any impact going beyond the medals that were received by the Canadian Sports for Life? Do we have change in obesity level of activity? Are people more active or not? Are there measurements? Are there other changes besides the number of medals?
I wish I could have a simple answer for this. We have a group that is called a Policy Implementation Measurement Group that has been meeting for 2 years to answer this question, and they haven't found the answer. So there's obviously the macro trends. How many medals did you win? What is the rate of obesity, inactivity? The difficulty that they have is to identify the effect of the changes to the macro measurements. And they haven't figured it out yet. So we continue to work.
Okay. E a última pergunta.
And the last question is from Michael from the Human Development Program for Sports. When we think about the challenge, which is to change values in sports, we have values that are social-culturally established. How can we face that? Because the values spread by the media and consumed by everyone are others, and they sometimes are contrary to what you are saying.
Well, this is a big challenge. As an example, early specialization. So the media shows us pictures of Tiger Woods playing golf at 1.5 years old. Every golf father in North America grabs his child and goes out and starts having him play golf. And if he's 3 years old, he thinks he has to catch up because he's behind. So mass media often doesn't help us. and they do give the wrong message, the wrong value. The way that we're addressing that would be in two primary ways. One, we're trying to get more and more top athletes speaking of things that are consistent with what we know to be true, and so to talk about their multi-sport experience as a child. I guess there's three ways. So there's one, there is to try and change the messaging in the mass media, or at least have different messages that then makes people think. Another is to do research so that we can show, very, very hard evidence that, as an example again, that top athletes are doing multiple sports, and we can show that. And then the kind of major strategy is that as we work with all the national sport organizations, that work with all the state organizations, that work with all their clubs, is that there's this new consistent messaging around these values that are being embedded into the community through the system, through the structure, so that then we modify behavior in that way.
Okay, thank you. Para encerrar.
So to close now, to close this conference, I'd like to thank. Eu tenho muitas perguntas para você depois.
A gente combinou e eu acabei esquecendo.
We agreed on that I had a question and I forgot it, in fact. It's very interesting. We have, what is the physical literacy relation with the physical yield? In practice, how has it happened? In Canada, there is an inclusive democratic system. The whole change has been made through sports. So, in sports of, I don't know in English, in Portuguese, is sports of yield.
Right. So, what we see, one of the challenges that we see in Canada is that high-performance sport marginalizes the concept of physical literacy because high performance says that, okay, that's good. It's good for mass sport. It's good for leisure. It's good for education and health. But we're high performance sport, and we're not really connected to that because we're special. And we say to them that physical literacy is very important for them. And so I'm going to show you why. So I want everybody to stand up. Okay. Paula, you should go there. I go here. Okay. Is everyone standing up? Okay, good. Everybody needed to move anyway. Okay. Now I want you to stand on one leg. Okay? One leg. Okay, can you move that leg around? Okay, how are we doing? Okay, stand on the other leg. Okay, how are we doing on that leg? Okay, are we good? Okay, so is your balance on both legs equal? How many would say that your ability to balance on both legs is equal? Only a few, right? Yeah, that's good. You would be typical of most groups. Your balance is not is not equal. My balance is pretty good, pretty equal. Okay, so balance is a foundational move and is a core within physical literacy. Okay, so now I'm going to change to, I know you all love football. And what do we know about strikers in football? What do we know? The best strikers in the world. I'm disappointed that you're not answering this question. The best strikers in the world are two-footed. Right? So if we don't develop children that have equal balance, they can't be two-footed. Right? Because you balance on a foot to strike the ball with the right. You balance on the other foot to strike the ball with the left. So if you're not balanced, you can't be two-footed. So you can't be among the best strikers in the world if you don't have proper physical literacy around the balance. How many of you play football? So many of you play football. And if you're a defender, you immediately identify if the striker that you're playing against is one-footed. Because then you defend that side because you want them to move to where they're less confident on the side that they're weaker. They're less confident. They're not motivated to go there because they've got a lower capability. Isn't that what Melanie talked about yesterday? Motivation and confidence and capability. So they're not balanced. So when you talk to the high-performance coach and they say, well, physical literacy is for somebody else, it's critical to the development of those movements in the children to those coaches being able to have two-footed players in the future. Now, there's people in this room that are probably saying, football is always about soccer in Brazil. However, we have a basketball player here, right? So I can say the same thing. If I know that Paula does not like to dribble with her left hand, what do? You're left-handed? You're left-handed. So she's an effective basketball player because I have trained over and over and over again against right-handed players. So my tendencies as a defender is always to defend the right hand. And so I'm surprised as Paula goes this way. She's left-handed. So now I have to adjust my defending because I want her to go to her right hand. She doesn't want to go to her right hand. Why? Because she's not completely physically literate. And so that's the connection. That's one of the connections between physical literacy and high-performance sport. Make sense?
Eu acho que eu não vou falar mais nada depois disso. Só agradecer.
Well, after this, I better don't say anything anymore. I want just to thank Richard and to congratulate him for this incredible competency leading this movement, not only in Canada, but in many countries as well. I hope it is inspiring for us in Brazil. I want to highlight 3 things which I get identified with, which come from Richard, which is the passion for sports. This becomes clear when we go to the stadium with him, for example, watching soccer, especially for São Paulo Football Club. We did our homework already. He became a fan.
But I was also identified as a hot foot for Corinthians.
Yeah, he's a hot foot for Corinthians. That's bad. I'll work harder on that. Eu vou trabalhar mais duro nisso.
I will work harder on that. And moreover, the ability of innovation, thinking differently, seeing beyond obvious things. And besides, Richard is a man of action. He says in English, so what, this whole story. The knowledge has to be able to transform people's lives. And it is a great example of how sport is transforming and automatically transforming the life of Canadians. So I thank for the generosity of sharing all this knowledge and wisdom with us. And I want to highlight my personal lessons which can help you in the different organizations, in social programs, people here who are responsible for public policies, to think what effectively means when we want to build or improve this national sports system in Brazil. It seems that when we talk about sports, that we recognize competition as an intrinsic element of it. But when we think about developing a system, we must go beyond, which is fighting for resources, installations, public audience, and we have struggle in all levels, men disputing space with women, NGOs with the government, public with private. So it seems that one of the pathways for that is understanding that the system happens in a collaborative context, understanding each one's role with a different view, because we are dealing not with objects but with people. So understanding the national system as a collaborative system, targeting the population and also for their different needs, understanding what sports in the childhood, adolescence, adults and elderly means, which is the design of the event, and how the sports experience can contribute in each one of those steps for human development. Understanding sports less than a tool to solve problems in education and health, but as an effective element of our culture, therefore as a human development factor, as we insist in positioning it in our program, and it aims as well. The last lesson is that sometimes we talk about a national system of sports, expecting it to solve all our problems, and the municipal secretariats and so on solve it. It's clear that it is not linear, it does not happen one after the other. It many times looks like a chaotic process. Things evolve until they meet at some point, and it makes much more sense to envision a transformation process from inside out rather than from top down. So transforming a whole country is very difficult. So how you, in your physical education class in the school, or you as a manager of an NGO, a club, or a SESC unit, can start the transformation within your institution, your family relations with your kids. So how we can promote this change. And I call for call out for work regarding how each one can generate their changes and impact our whole nation in somehow. So I want to thank for the opportunity of being able to learn this from you. So we are about to start our next activity, and let's give him one more clap of hands because he deserves it.